You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by Homefield Apparel.
Welcome back to Crimson Cast, and happy 4th of July, everybody. Galen Clavio, Scott Caulfield joining you on the show. And we are living it up. It's Independence Day weekend, or week, I guess. It's always interesting when these holidays fall on like a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, Scott. I mean, you know, like Memorial Day, it's Monday, it's part of a weekend, no problem. Labor Day, it's part of a weekend, you know, but Independence Day, probably more than any of the other ones, is like a wild card. Like, you know, when Christmas happens, it's, or, you know, you've got that week, and then New Year, it's like all part of the same like holiday complex. But obviously, I think everybody loves it when the 4th of July happens like this in the middle of the week, for almost every reason except the parades, because it's like, you know, that we've been having this debate in our neighborhood, like, are we having the parade on the 4th? It looks like not, because it's supposed to rain down here. Does that mean we've then pushed it to the weekend? Should it just be there already? Is that when the fireworks happen? But on the flip side, it's like, I feel like everybody on the in the United States is probably taking at least part of Friday off, if not the entire Friday, and maybe taking today off as well. So happy 4th, Scott, I guess is my message to you.
Yeah, and to me, the 4th is always like the apex of summer, because you get out of school, and then June's kind of like, man, like I gotta, you know, just enjoy summer, and you kind of do a couple things in June, and it's like June always seems to go pretty long in my mind, and then you get to the 4th of July, and then it's like normally there's a couple of camps for the kids, maybe you take 1 week of vacation, but next thing you know, it's like you're staring down the barrel of, you know, for my wife starting school, teaching again, it's like, man, we're 3 weeks away from the start. Like after the 4th, it just becomes a quick downhill sled right into school starting. And I'm sure you're thinking exactly what my wife thinks, because I'm always like, yeah, only 2 weeks. She's like, stop it. Why are you bringing that up? Like, we're still in summer.
I mean, and look, as a college educator myself, I can see it coming. And, you know, even though the elementary school and middle school and high school go back earlier in August, like ridiculously early, in my opinion, we've got that coming on the horizon as well. So yes, I feel it quite keenly. Why you brought it up, I have no idea. But I also will say that I feel like July still feels safe. I don't really feel like, when I'm in July, I feel like I'm in a nice protected bubble of time off for the most part as someone who teaches. I obviously, many of you out there do not feel that way because you're working throughout the course of the full year. And I'm frankly still working myself. I'm in the office, but like, it's the pressure, the added pressure of like everybody being back. I think living in a college town like Bloomington, it's like a specific type of unique feeling, because Bloomington, for those of you who you know, because you grew up here. Yeah. And for those of you who have lived in Bloomington and have taken the time to do a Bloomington summer, it is vacant down here. Like and even more so now, like it used to be that people would come to Bloomington for the first part of the summer. You'd have I-Corps kids, or you'd have people doing summer school. That really doesn't happen much now after the pandemic. Bloomington is kind of a ghost town. And so even though you're right, you know, the school year and all of that pressure is on the horizon, it does feel like a weird oasis right up until the end of July in Bloomington, and probably in other college towns, because there's just nobody around.
It's the thing that I maybe miss. One of the things I miss quietly most about living in Bloomington year in, year out, and growing up there, is that you're right. Like, even when there was a lot of summer school going on, like the late June, mid July, it is the hibernation period for Bloomington. Like, everything is empty, everything's available. And it's one of those things you can go back for a day or two and be like, man, that, like, living in it like you are now, it's like the city has so much bustle for a small town with college when it's in, that when it's out, it is such a weird month. So I know exactly what you're saying. The other thing that I will just, you know, having a podcast, I will make one request here for one of our, I'm not sure if he listens, but a friend of yours, but I don't want to call him out, but IU Gray on Instagram, so he knows who he is. He's doing what I've always wanted to do as a kid who played tennis growing up in high school. I always get into Wimbledon.
Talking about Jeremy Gray. Like,
no, I don't want to just, I mean, I want to at least have something. That's his Twitter handle. I'm not trying to call him out, but you did. So there you go. Jeremy Gray, if you're listening, he has some pictures posted at Wimbledon. These are on public social media places. I have always wanted to go to Wimbledon. I watch it every year. I love it. Getting tickets seems tough. So reach out, man. Let me know how you got the tickets, and let's talk, because that's been like highlight of my sports bucket list as we talk about July things. So
you two, I greatly admire both of you, and you both love tennis, and I don't. Like, tennis to me is a sport that I've never been able to get connected to on an emotional level. So I'm always fascinated by that, the people who have the emotional connection to tennis and who want to go to these, kind of temples of the game. And Wimbledon obviously is probably the biggest one of them all. I don't know. I find the whole thing fascinating. It looks very amazing. I have nothing else to say on it besides that.
Open. I took my dad in like 2016 to the U.S. Open. And it's a cool experience because you have that, and we'll get onto other. And thanks for watching Crimson Cast July and tennis talk.
Man, you ever watch Pat McAfee? They barely even have a topic most of the time. We're doing fine. The audience is not asking for an apology here.
That's fair. But you go to what I found really cool about it is you have center court, you have court one, obviously. All the other courts are just kind of first come, first serve. At least in the U.S. Open. And I think it's, from what I've read, it's that way at all the other majors. And they have 18 courts. So you can walk around, and it's like I was watching, mixed doubles at the time, and there was Martina Hingis. I'm like, 4 rows back watching her in a mixed doubles. There's a lot of juniors, and you could just go and sit like second row. And it's like, court 17 out there. Now, I'm not sure if Wimbledon is a little more intimate, but this is U.S. Open, and they had full crowds. But most people don't kind of go out to the other. And that's where we spend most of our time. And it's just like you're still watching high-level elite tennis, and it's still a really cool area. So my goal is to get to all 4 majors at some point.
It's always interesting to me what we do for certain sports and not others. Like, the NCAA tournament could hypothetically be held in a huge multi-court complex with games all happening simultaneously, or the Indiana high school tournament could theoretically be like held that way. Yet we don't do that. We hold it in individual spots. So I always think about, well, what would the tournament look like if we held it all in one place? Although it kind of sounds like this Vegas event might grow into that, this MTE they're doing with NIL. But I also wonder, like, what if tennis was happening all over the country, like the NCAA tournament does, in like clusters of matches? I don't know, that it would. Because part of it for me, honestly,
small crowds. That was what it would be.
Well, would it though? Because you can only get so many people into that one venue, and everybody's just buying tickets for that. It might be interesting to spread it out a little bit. It wouldn't be the same type of event, but maybe another event that's like that would be interesting.
Like the World Cup, because the World Cup plays like 8 different sites in the country, and then you move together, and it's like, oh, like is Djokovic going to get out of the Birmingham regional? Right.
Djokovic in Birmingham by itself is a fascinating, like,
wouldn't go. He'd just be like, no, I'm out. Like, I don't do Birmingham, Alabama. Sorry. And to our Birmingham listeners, nothing against Birmingham, but it's Djokovic, not you.
Anyway, before we we've already started, so I can't even say that. But just a reminder, folks, we are brought to you by Homefield Apparel, your place to go for the finest in college fashions, the softest fabrics, the coolest designs. Scott, the Ospreys are coming. University of North Florida Ospreys dropping, I think, Friday of this week as the part of the Sweet Summer 7. Some cool mascots, some things you might not normally see in a national release. I'm glad that they're getting their moment in the sun. And I believe they're in the Atlantic Sun, which there's some synergy there, obviously. But lots of other great things going on. They just had a big sale, Homefield Apparel, a lot of stuff. I think it was 20 or 30% off. You can get 15% off your first order at Homefield Apparel if you head over to homefieldapparel.com on your first order and use the code HOME23, HOME23. So be sure to check that out. Check out that North Florida collection. Check out the Delta State collection. All kinds of fun new stuff. And, of course, we are ramping up for college football season, which will be coming very soon.
As a July, keeping our July theme going, you haven't mentioned, or I haven't heard you mention it yet, but one of the hot things they have that I'm debating pulling the trigger on is they have retro baseball jerseys, which just look phenomenal. Like the Florida one looks really good. Tulane looks pretty hot. Like I'm not sure how well I would look in a full pullover baseball jersey, but they look, the designs are awesome. So check those out.
Those look amazing, and I share the same concern you do, Scott. I feel like I'm a few 100,000 calories lost away from really being able to pull that off. So, these are the things we accept when we get to the age bracket where our demographic no longer matters to advertisers, which is exactly where we're at right now. So, anyway, let's also just a reminder, folks, join the Crimson Cast Substack. It's free. And there's over 900 people who've joined Crimson Cast Substack. You get podcasts delivered right to your inbox. You get some extra goodies. Scott and I did a VIP episode this past weekend. And we've got plenty of things that I think you will enjoy. There's community notes on Substack. There's a nice network of IU-related things, including Bite-Sized Bison from our good friend Taylor Lehman. That's been going strong. They're on Substack as well. So go check all that out. And consider signing up for the free subscription to Crimson Cast Substack. We'd love to have you join us. Scott, it's an interesting time right now, obviously, because we're like right on the brink of a lot of cool stuff happening with IU sports. And we're still in the kind of the soft period of things where there's not a huge amount of content. But this is a good time to sign up for things because it's easy in the rush of everything that happens in August and September to forget. Right. And you get on our Substack, you're going to get right up there and understand what's going on with the world of IU athletics. So please sign up. It would be great to have you. Also, I need to apologize. Apparently, in our last podcast, we got a note on our community Discord from Trent Perkins that I've apparently mispronounced something while trying to make fun of you.
Yes. Man, how the tables have turned.
So I inadvertently and erroneously pronounced the wine region that everybody knows in Oregon as the Willamette Valley, and it's apparently the Willamette Valley. I was not aware of this. I assumed you, as someone who's so cultured, might have corrected me in the moment, but I'm guessing you were just trying to be nice to me. Is that right?
I know my place. I mean, we have a history. We can go back, but I'll do that off pod. I'm not going to do that on pod, but it's nice to know that, all of us make mistakes, some more than others.
Right. Anyway, those are the things to think about, I guess. And we gotta make sure if you guys hear us screw up, please let us know. That's part of the fun.
Well, not me. Like I get a couple mulligans. I get 3 per show. Like after 3, then you can start putting them out there.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Well, Scott, your screw ups are just kind of like it's the fabric of the show. Like that's the fiber that keeps the thing afloat.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, I'm kidding. Anyway, let's tackle a few things. First of all, Scott, when you were younger, how much did you play the college football video game?
Oh, a ton.
Okay. So the if you haven't seen this yet, have you watched the reveal video that they just put out? That like
the one they just put out. I've seen some of the ones that were coming up as I've not seen the latest one. I'm kind of at a point. I'm very excited. I'm kind of at a point. I'm just waiting for the game. Like at this point, like I don't need any more ampness. I'm just ready for the game. And I have a story about this I can tell later, but go with your point.
No. Go ahead and tell it now, because I mean, this will all tie in, I think.
No, I mean, to give you an idea of how fired up I am about this and how I played, I think this was, as always with a lot of these things, this is pre-kids. For those of you who don't have kids, there will be a delineation line in your life of pre-kids and post-kids. They're both great. But before kids, my brother-in-law and I, we started a dynasty. One of the first times you could do an online dynasty. We did an NCAA football dynasty. We played 30 years. We saved all of our draft classes, and then we went through and played 30 years of Madden, importing each one every year. And it was great because you're like year 12, and it's like, oh, like Johnny Oates, like I got that receiver was great. Like I'm so excited to get him. I got to draft him. And I remember, I mean, I got so good with the 4 verticals play. I had a receiver, like one game, my brother-in-law got, I think like 900 yards receiving in one game and was like number 1 in the Heisman. And then I just got like 1,200 yards. Like I would literally take a sack, get back to the 1 yard line, and then just have 99 yards for a touchdown. And it was, our stats were insane. Definitely broke the game. And I'm very excited for the game to come back. Anyway, that's
right. I would recommend for those who haven't watched it yet, watching the Dynasty breakdown and how that mode's going. It looks very complex. It looks like a very kind of on steroids version of what we saw in the last couple of itinerations of the game. And that I'm fascinated that this is coming back into our lives. I really am. Like this, it feels for our generation in particular, I feel like it's like a missing link. It's like an element of DNA that kind of dropped out of the species and then is back again. And it's fascinating to think about as a college student playing these games. I remember James Turner, co-host of Crimson Cash. When we got to school, we did not know each other. We got paired. It was a potluck roommate situation at Teeter, Thompson 5, represent. I had a Sega 16 that I bought off of my best friend at home from high school that I brought with me. And I had I think I had NHL 94. I had a couple of other games. It was great gaming. But he brought, once he found out I had this, he then brought down his copy of Bill Walsh College Football 96, I think it was, which I think was the first version. And I remember playing that. I remember then getting a PlayStation for the first time. There was a guy down the hall, Scotty Whalen, I think it was, that had a PlayStation. And we mostly played NHL 98 on that. There were people across the hall that had an N64, which we would play like FIFA on that. But then when I got the PlayStation, I remember one of the first games I bought was NCAA 99. That was the first itineration there. And it's wild to think about when you go back. I went back and actually tried to play it. I have an emulator on my Steam Deck. I'm able to download some of the old PS1 ROMs and play those. And it's like, wow, I forgot how insanely primitive this was. There were no broadcasters. You had the PA guy who, as I learned much later, was actually the PA guy for UCLA football. You had, it was a surprise if your game got selected for television, which is hilarious now when you think that television has broken college football conferences. It's broken the whole sport. But at the time, it was a big deal, especially if you're coaching Indiana, if you were on regional television, let alone the national broadcast. There were just so many. The recruiting was very basic. I think that first year, if I'm not mistaken, there was one recruiting cycle. There weren't two. It was just so many things that were very, very not advanced about the game. But we all kind of lived this arc through college. If you were in college in the late 90s, early 2000s, into early professional years, I guess.
I feel like guys like you and me at our age, people who played those early games, I remember when Boise State beat Oklahoma in whatever BCS game that was. And that's when kind of the national media was like, oh, this team, they play on a blue field. And I was like, I've known this for 9 years. I know about Boise State, the Idaho,
Dome. Yes.
Yeah, the dome. It's with the two walls on the side. It's you started to, you'd start the game, you'd play, I love Indiana. You play with Indiana, this sucks. And you go play with Georgia or somebody good, or, at that time it was probably, more the Tennessee or something with
Florida State was a big one. I remember even Travis Minor on halfback tosses all the time. Yeah. So
then you go into the low level schools and you started to really get to know like when Brett Favre was back at Mississippi State for some real sports thing. It's oh, I know that stadium. I played 3 years there. Anyway, go ahead.
No, it is. I just think it's interesting because it's one of those games that there was a legitimate reason, obviously, why it stopped getting made. And it's fascinating that with all the changes that have happened in college football, it's coming back. And I mean, there's the nostalgia that we're getting from people in advance of this game coming in is like nothing I've seen in a while. And I think it's great. It's to some degree, it's one of the few things in pop culture that feels like it really worth looking forward to if you are a guy who likes sports. I'm sure we have some of our female listeners who will play and will be interested, but it always felt like very much like if you were in high school or college when that game was happening, it was in some way, shape, or form a part of your life. And it just kind of drifted away. And like many other things that we were used to, non-superhero movies or, other things along those lines, it felt like something that wasn't ever coming back. So it is cool to see it coming back now. And we're starting to see some real buildup because the game releases in less than 2 weeks if you did the pre-order.
I'm also excited because, the last iteration was 2012 or
14. Well, it's NCAA 14. It came out in August of 13 or July of 13.
I mean, obviously the internet was there and there was still all of that, but the internet and the, social media culture has changed so much that, when I was really deep into it was, college and those posts, 10 years after college, when, it felt like if we were playing and you wanted to tell me like, oh, I have a great play and a couple playbooks, like you would just basically write it down and like show it to me. Like I'm excited for a world now where I can just go onto a Reddit board and get on a couple of messages and just see like, all right, where's the 4 verticals play I want to run? And like, what are the variations? And can I watch some YouTube videos of somebody scoring with this? Like there's a whole outside world of playing this game that wasn't available to you and I when we were really into it, that I'm excited to see that kind of develop and flourish as well.
Yeah, it'll be really fascinating as we move forward here with everything, because it's just like there's always the chance the game isn't going to be good. But I will say, the more I see in these preview videos, it at least feels like they've gotten the features right. I mean, the big issues that we've had with the game, the older issues were it was kind of clunky in terms of how the game played, especially in those later editions. It got a little feature heavy. And I didn't think that the actual on-field action was at the level that I would have liked it to have been. And then obviously the concern has been microtransactions, which I think there'll still be some of that. You're not going to get away from that, unfortunately, in 2024. But it does look really good. And the features that they've decided to put in thus far that we've seen have looked really good. And the thing I'm really fascinated about, you said you were playing with your friends in an online dynasty. Like, I never really did that, because by the time the online dynasties really became a thing, I didn't know you were playing in an online dynasty. I never got an invite. So, it'll
be coming. It'll be coming.
Well, we'll see. I mean, so you can do 32 different people in an online dynasty, from what I've heard. So that will be fascinating to watch this play out. What I'm a little concerned about, and I think you should be as well, and this is a thing that that's been shared by people. You don't realize how bad you get at playing video games as you get older. Games like this that require like reactions. Yeah. And so we've all been on ice for 10 years with this. I know I have not been playing Madden. Have you been playing Madden regularly in the lead up to this?
I've not. I used to like basketball games.
Yeah.
Which two quick stories. One, you talk about rudimentary. I went back and I still have I have emulators, but I have some of the old, like my Super Nintendo still works. I went back and played NCAA basketball, which I think was the first 3D version of basketball, and it's way raw. I mean, it's interesting because it's the view we now have, but it's just like it's a blue background, just like kind of this blue like Tronscape that just goes on forever. It's really bizarre. My son has gotten into 2K, so he's been playing an absolute ton of 2K. I've gone and played some, and it's been kind of fun. It's tough, man. Like, yeah, the skills have atrophied, and you and I grew up in a D-pad button world. The thumbsticks, like, at least, and basketball was always a tougher game to play than football. Just the geometry and the way to make things work were always tougher. But like, if you don't use those middle sticks on 2K, you can't do 98% of it. It's like the game's just kind of like, well, you're not going to be able to do no-look passes. Like, it's just not something you're going to be able to do. So I'm curious to see how that fits in, because if there's going to need to be a lot of thumbstick work, I might need to start working out the thumbs on this, because yeah, it's definitely a much different gaming environment.
I wonder if there's I think EA actually blew a golden opportunity here. This is where I was leading to. Okay. I feel like they should offer an online boot camp for old people.
Yes.
Like, if you're over 30, you just pay $4 and you can practice ahead of time. Cause I just, I have a lot of former students who are friends of mine now who I'd like to have in an online dynasty. I think it'd be fun, but I'm actually kind of petrified about getting obliterated by people 10, 15, 20 years younger than me playing this game. And I feel like I need some training. And certainly I'm going to download it as soon as it gets started. I'll probably just block out of work for a couple of days so I can try to get up to speed. But I really think there's a chance that we might have to segregate by age category with this game, because I am worried about just not being able to compete. because you see this in other online gaming environments. You see it if you play FIFA online or some of these other games online. It's not FIFA anymore, I know, but whatever. Where you just can't keep up. And it's actually an interesting trend in esports. If anybody follows esports, where like the average career lifespan of an esports athlete, quote unquote, is really short. And we're talking about like you're out by 22 because you can't keep up with what's going on with people that are 18, 19 years old. So this will be a fascinating thing. I'm looking forward to hearing all of the stories online about, people our age or slightly younger just getting boat raced in important games.
It's possible, or you could just have the Galen rule where it's like, all right, everyone else is Sunbelt and I'm Georgia.
Right.
And that's the way we're going to work.
Sorry, I get to play on varsity level. You're playing on Heisman. It's that's how it goes.
One of the things I used to do is I would just focus on getting really good at offense, and then even playing defense. A lot of times I would just sim the defense, and then when I was playing a real person, I would still just kind of like I'd pick a defensive lineman and I would just put the controller down. It's like sometimes the game it's almost like the old Tecmo Bowl. Like I just hope the defense I picked kind of does well, and then I might just run after if you're doing a quarterback sneak.
Well, all right. So let's hit a couple other things before we wrap up here. So
last video game thing, I just got to say, you were talking about this earlier. Is just a one moment. I have to commend you on a super funny, like remembering in a line when you were talking about these games coming out last time. And you mentioned like one of the last years they came out with the game and their big thing was like pylon physics.
Yes.
Physics. It's just, I remember that. And I remember thinking like, who cares? Like, who cares?
This is
just like a callback. I had not thought of that for 10 years.
Well, yeah. And when we were when they were talking about this game happening last year, this is where I was worried because it's like, this is how far that franchise had kind of fallen in terms of EA. I don't know. So this is what happens with my brain, folks, is like random stuff sticks in my head for no good reason whatsoever. And
go ahead. Next.
Anyway, so a couple of things we wanted to hit. We had some questions. Jim Hoff asked, Antoine Randall and Vaughn Dunbar were both named on the 2024 College Football Hall of Fame induction ballot. What do you think their chances are of getting in? And this was one of those things that first of all, I wanted to talk to you about the College Football Hall of Fame. Is this something you ever think about?
No.
Okay. I don't either, which is an interesting thing. It's like Hall of Fames in general, I feel like were much bigger deals in certain sports before. Like, I feel like the only two that really matter and are relevant to people are the Baseball Hall of Fame, which has become almost not worth paying attention to because it just feels like a bunch of kids fighting with each other now and gatekeeping. And then the Pro Football Hall of Fame, which does feel weirdly like almost more relevant than the Baseball Hall of Fame in that it feels like mega exclusive in a lot of ways, given the huge number of people that play football and have played football. But anyway, putting that aside, I can't really, if you ask me like how many people are in the College Football Hall of Fame, I wouldn't get it within probably 100.
If you ask me where is the College Football Hall of Fame,
right?
I'm not sure I'd be able to answer that question.
I mean, I know it's in Atlanta, but it wasn't in Atlanta for a long time. And I think it was in South Bend for a while. But I always remember like going to Kings Island and they had like a sign for like a College Football Hall of Fame. But it was like, is that the real College Football Hall of Fame? I don't think it was.
Right.
But it also got me thinking, I have no idea. Like, does Indiana have any players in the College Football Hall of Fame? And so I had to look this up. Do you know if Indiana has any football players in the College Football Hall of Fame?
I don't. I mean, I would assume Anthony Thompson would be in.
He is. He was in the class. He's actually the most recently elected member. He was elected in 2007.
I'm going to mess the name. George Taliaferro.
George Taliaferro's in. Yes, he was in the class of 81.
Yeah.
So that it's there are only 3 other members. Indiana has 5.
Did Mallory make it?
No.
Okay.
Well, if he did, he didn't make it as from Indiana. Like this, I think you had to go to the school. And the other three are Pete Pios, who most people don't remember. He was actually a very high draft pick in I think the 40s or 50s. Zora Clevenger, who some people might remember that name, and then John Tavener, who I had not even heard of. And then there's actually two other people when you type in Indiana that pop up, but they are both from Indiana University of Pennsylvania, which does not count. However, one of those two people is Frank Signetti, the father of current Indiana head coach Curt Signetti.
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
It counts.
But no, to answer Jim's question, I wish I had any kind of an idea of like what the chances are that either Antoine or Von Dunbar would get in. I had to go look at the criteria for being for being inducted in the College Football Hall of Fame. And so the criteria of this are apparently the following. A player must have achieved major first-team All-America recognition, which certainly Antoine fits under. A player becomes eligible for consideration 10 years after his last year. Both of them qualify. Football achievements are first, but the post-football record as a citizen is also weighed. That's interesting. Players must have played their last year of intercollegiate football within the last 50 years. So there's a kind of a time out on this.
Right.
You have to have ended your professional career prior to the time of nomination. I'm assuming as a player, not as a coach. And then coaches have to have had at least 10 years of head coaching experience, coached at least 100 games, and had at least a 600 winning percentage, which has been, I think, there's a controversy there involving, like, I think Mike Leach, who's like right below that mark because of something. Anyway, looking at that, I don't think Von Dunbar has a great chance of getting in, given that he had a relatively short college career since he was a junior college transfer. I think Antoine might have a decent chance, and I think he might be the best bet. And, when I read that criteria, it's hard to think of other IU players that would be in the mix, given that particular set of criteria. Just because in the last 50 years, other than Anthony Thompson, I can't think of a whole lot of other people who had that set of like national accolades and made a mark on the game other than Antoine Randall. I mean, it's, there's certainly been great players. There's been players that have been drafted high. There have been players that have been named All-Americans, but very few that kind of would rise to the level that you might expect.
Yeah. I mean, everybody I can think of kind of had a one year run, but didn't really have a 2-year run. Maybe Tevin Coleman, but that's also, it kind of felt like a one year thing.
I also don't think Tevin Coleman had like major.
Correct.
I guess he was a unanimous All-American in 2014. He was first team All Big Ten. So maybe that would be enough. But again, that's the kind of player I'm talking about, where it's like, I don't know that anybody really in 20, 30 years will look back and say, man, you remember that Tevin Coleman season at Indiana when they went 5-7?
Something you mentioned in your last podcast that it bears mentioning again and again. It now is rearing its head again. The 2001 football season with Indiana overscheduling. I'm rehashing everything you said, but it's like
great content deserves a second airing.
Yes, and we're going to come back to more pylon dynamics here at the end. But you have North Carolina State, Utah, and Kentucky are their non-conference games. They lose Utah. It is at Indiana, and they lose 28-26. It's a close game. You pull that out. That Indiana team is now 6-5. They're probably going to a bowl. If you give them 2 cupcakes, they're 7-4, and maybe now Antoine Randall is a Heisman finalist, and now he can add that to his resume for the College Football Hall of Fame in a location to be named later in my mind. But it's like overscheduling maybe is going to cost Antoine Randall the ability to be in the College Football Hall of Fame and also being a Heisman finalist. Because then Indiana plays in a bowl, and it changes the entire memory of that season outside of Indiana even, and what he did. So that's the first thing I thought of, is like, damn it, the scheduling is kind of screwing this up again.
You realize, you may not remember that game, but Indiana lost that game. They missed an extra point and missed a field goal. And obviously lost by 2, which that did not help matters anything. But it's pretty fascinating when you think about just the way that some of this stuff went for IU. And we talk about Anthony Thompson missing out on a bowl because Indiana loses at the end of that 1989 season, and they go 5-6,
and losing the Heisman. I mean, he might have won the Heisman.
Right. I mean, I think he finished second in the Heisman in that, but again, that was a season where Indiana goes 5-6, and one of their losses was at Kentucky, which yes, that was it was a rivalry game, but again, it's like they played two. They played an SEC school in Kentucky, and they played Missouri, who was a Big 8 school. In the non-conference, they had one like easy game in the non-conference, which was Toledo, and that Big Ten that year, like they lose at Ohio State, they lose at Michigan, who was 5th in the country. They get blown out at home by Michigan State, and they lose at Illinois, who was 12th in the country. Like that was a pretty good team for Indiana. They had 3 really good wins in the conference, including a big win at Wisconsin. They beat Northwestern, they beat Minnesota, but just no margin for error in some of these seasons. It really does make you think, if you go back, like if you just take the easy road or the easier road, the history's just slightly different enough that maybe there's some momentum that you can build on.
Well, no, and you have, I mean, it's so funny because when we were in school, this is where time just messes with your mind. But when you and I were in school, the Anthony Thompson era felt like eons before us. I mean, it just felt like that might have been, punt time. Like that was just 50 years ago. It was only, 12 years before we were in school. The Anthony Thompson was there. Now I look back at, things that happened 12 years ago, and it's like, doesn't seem like that long ago, but you change a couple of things here. I know we're playing the what if game, but I've always done this with IU football. Like you give a couple of wins that, one or two wins in that season, that team goes to a bowl. Maybe Anthony Thompson wins a Heisman. So that is in what, 88?
It was 89, but yeah.
Sorry. So he has a Heisman win in 89 and maybe a bowl win or whatever. Only 10 years later, you now have another player from Indiana in the Heisman finalist in Antoine Randall, if maybe they schedule a little easier. And now it's like, all right, Indiana, like 10 years, you have a Heisman winner and a finalist. Like no one's going to write a book about, like that's pretty good. Like that might be better than a lot of schools you would think of that are in the Big Ten. Like you might be I don't have the list in front of me. There's probably only a couple of schools in the Big Ten who would have a better track record of Heisman Trophy winners. I don't know if it leads to anything, but it definitely is better than where we're at now, where we have nobody who's won a Heisman. I don't know. And it's just like, you start thinking like that would only be 10 years apart, having 2 Heisman Trophy finalists. That's pretty dang good. And I think a lot of it goes back to scheduling.
Did you know, I'm looking at the College Football Hall of Fame ballot here. 5.62 million people have played college football, and only 1,074 players have been inducted, which apparently is 0.02% of all of the participants. So I guess that's a great honor if you make it into that echelon. There's also a ton of people nominated. Like go check out the FBS player candidate capsule bios alone. I have not counted them, but Antoine Randall and Vaughn Dunbar are in there with a ton of people. I mean, and it's frankly, like it's names like Michael Vick and Peter Warwick and Terrell Suggs and Takeo Spikes and Alex Smith and Ron Rivera. And I mean, it's a loaded group of people. It's I don't know. So we'll keep our fingers crossed on all of that. But I just wanted to make sure we followed up on Jim's question. So
which logo does Antoine go in with? Does he go with the oval or does he go with the trident?
He only played under the oval.
I know. So he would go in under
I go into the oval.
Yeah. I don't even know if they have logos they go in under.
That's a good point.
Will that make a PTI segment?
Probably not. I'm guessing that's not Mays. It's the E block. It's the block that happens during the commercial after the show's over. Yes. Luke Bellotta asked, given the corporate on-field and uniform sponsorships are seemingly impending with college sports, and we've seen a lot of this here lately where it's like this is going to be a revenue stream that college athletics are going to have to tap into. Who would be your choices for corporate logos to appear on our uniforms and on the field? And Luke says, obviously, Homefield apparel. Luke knows how the business runs, clearly. What would be most realistic? What would be most fun? You have freedom to take it where you want. So, Scott, let's start. If we're going to do a field logo for IU football, what are you slapping down at the 25-yard lines?
It's a great question. And by the way, college is up on this. If you haven't seen, like, the Big 12 is selling big. It's like they're the all-state 12 now. Like, they sold the name big. So, people got up in arms about the NBA putting, a small logo on the jersey. Like, college is just unabashed. Like, we'll just sell names on things.
I mean, I won't be shocked if Kansas State just renames the whole institution. They just become like Deloitte University or something like that.
Yeah, they play off of Manhattan. Like, we're like, they just didn't get a whiskey to name the thing. All right, so what would you? Well, I wouldn't have the Hank Bison anywhere on the field.
So you're not thinking that Endeavor is going to be the on-field sponsor.
No. This is where do you go with some of the sponsors that you see all over the place at IU Sports? Like, does IU Credit Union take a spot there? Like, are they big enough, or is this something where the Big Ten is stepping in and kind of like, hey, we're going to help all of our schools?
Let's say this is corporate interest talking to Indiana specifically, or really talking to Learfield on Indiana's behalf. Like, we want to advertise at IU. We want our logo in front of you folks, you fans at IU. Not a Big Ten decision. This is something that's coming from the school itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to see a bank. You're going to probably see a bank and an apartment complex on one of those two spots. So I would say probably, IU Credit Union, and then, Hunter Properties seems to be spending a lot of money in the Bloomington market. Maybe Granite Properties, one of those property companies might be in there. I think this is probably too rich for, a Buffalo Louie's or one of those, but the group that owns Scotty's, maybe they're in there.
Scotty's? Are they around anymore?
A group like that. Yeah, it's all right. Very good. Cut that. No, I don't want any discord.
We're leaving that in. Sorry. That's not going anywhere. Scotty's, that's a blast away. Scotty's closed, I think, like 8 years ago in Bloomington, 7 years. It's been a while. But yes. So
but we all make mistakes.
That's fine.
But I do think there might be one kind of Indiana-based larger company that might want to get into it. So I don't know if you see like a Lilly or a Salesforce or somebody like that try and get into it. But those are kind of my initial thoughts. I'm going to let you talk and then think a little bit too, and try and find the right answer.
That's interesting. Well, it feels like there'd be some good options that won't do it. Like, I think like Culver's could use more market share. The Culver's is very popular here in Bloomington, but Culver's being a field sponsor for anybody but Wisconsin kind of is against their own brand at this point.
Yeah.
I keep seeing Zaxby's popping up everywhere. There's one in Mooresville now, or in Canby, I guess it technically is. It's like they're getting closer to Bloomington. It's one of those deals where I actually feel like the thing about a company like Lilly, what are you putting the logo on the field for? If you're Lilly, you're probably not getting a lot of consumer goods coming through that. I wouldn't mind Southwest Airlines, who does a ton of business out of Indianapolis. They do so much investment in sports. That would seem like, not that Southwest needs a huge amount of advertising, but that would seem like a logical kind of connector. If we're just sticking with good scale local businesses, I mean, it would be really cool. And I think the brand exposure for Upland would be fascinating, given that Upland is a regional kind of quasi-national brand. Although you can get Upland in New York, you can get it in Michigan. It would be fun actually if at least the Midwestern Big Ten schools, and it's weird that we have to delineate the Big Ten like that now. Well, the home country right. Big Ten schools, if they all got sponsored by a prominent local brewery, so Bell's ends up being the field sponsor at Michigan State, or I mean, there's no culture in Illinois, so we can't really use Illinois. But New Glarus,
they just do Coors Light. They're just like, well, we don't have it. We're doing Natty Light.
Illinois definitely feels like Ham's territory or something like that. The Iowa gets what is that one in Iowa? Whatever the is it Toppling Goliath? Is that the brewery up there?
New Glarus for Wisconsin.
I think that would be kind of a cool, especially if there was a web of those. But anyway, that was kind of what I was thinking there. So, but overall, I'm fascinated to see what's that going to be worth. I mean, because the field sponsorships in particular, that's a lot of TV exposure. Mm-hmm. And, with as many people as watch football, it's to me, there's no problem with it. I mean, it's another way to make money. It's you don't even have to put it on the field. You probably will want to because you're getting 60,000 people, but you could just project it on. So I think it'll be an interesting thing to watch. And I would be on board with the all brewery, field logo things. The logo, the jersey patch. I mean, it kind of feels like that one. I actually think the jersey patches are. You need a company that's got a really recognizable and uncomplicated logo.
Agreed.
Whenever like the Outback Bowl was played, I always felt like the Outback logo was like way too busy.
Yeah.
It was like I only know what I'm looking at because I've driven by so many Outback steakhouses in my lifetime, but it was like that's too much to put on the jersey. So you want to avoid those kinds of things. But that's the thing. It doesn't feel like the companies that are in Indiana who would like to like do mass consumer marketing, like Cummins doesn't need like a lot of people like, seeing their logo on a jersey and be like, let me go buy an engine. Like what am I doing there?
Yeah. And Salesforce is way more B2B.
The one thing I am thinking, and I think we might've mentioned this on an earlier podcast, it would be interesting if like Lilly decides like, we're going to bust Ozempic out as its own like brand, sub-brand with its own logo, and that becomes the logo. That would be an interesting, like, let's put a weight loss injection drug as the jersey logo on a team in the Big Ten and see what happens.
I'm thinking of like you have Ozempic on the 20-yard line, but then the 30, 40, 50-yard line are all of the complications, and you got to talk to your doctor. It's just like,
no. I think you're going the wrong way with this. I think you have fast food logos on every like hashtag, every 10 yards, and then you have Ozempic at the 20. And it's like, well, all right, yep, that's where you're headed. So.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because one of the ideas I had to talk to you about for the pod, which we're not going to do, is just like if every conference was going to sell their name, what company would go best with the conference? But it's just there's too many ways to go that way. But it's going to what I think is going to be interesting is I think I know the answer, because the answer is always going to be more money. But are you going to see more conferences like the All-State Big 12 or the All-State 12 selling way more sponsorships and looking so minor league, and the Big 10 and the SEC kind of being like, all right, we got a ton of TV money, we don't need to do that? But I know where this always goes, and this always goes to, hey, you brought me a check, we're the Ozempic Big 10. Like, that's what's going to happen.
I don't know, man. I mean, there was an article in the Columbus Dispatch yesterday covering Ohio State where the athlete, they have a new athletic director at Ohio State, and he came out and said, we're going to have to seek new sources of revenue to cover revenue sharing with athletes because they have a $10 million shortfall in their budget. Now, keep in mind, for those who don't know, Ohio State has the second largest athletic budget in the entirety of college sports. It's like $210 million. I think it is somewhere in that range. Texas is the only school with a bigger budget. But the difference is, like, and I've mentioned this on the show before, so apologies for repeating myself, but Ohio State sponsors 36 varsity sports. Texas, I think, only sponsors like 22. Indiana sponsors 24. We've talked about how Indiana sponsors a ton of sports, but Ohio State sponsors a ton of sports. And, they're either going to have to cut some of those, or they're going to have to do things like this, where they just look for every possible source of revenue. Now, eventually I think you're going to have some market correction in terms of coaches' salaries, because you just can't keep paying coaches the insane amounts of money that you're paying them with these budgetary shortfalls coming in. But I think that it is going to be really fascinating to watch what happens as these athletic departments try to come to grips with the sheer amount of money that they don't have and what they're going to have to find in order to make it right.
So I'm trying to find, I was trying to think like, all right, so what company would be best suited to give money to Ohio State? And I Googled like most hated companies in America, but it's like the list is bananas. And like, it's a list that has some really ones I wouldn't agree with, but my thought would be like, they'd be a perfect match for like ExxonMobil or like Shell Oil. Just, an old behemoth company.
I feel like you're missing maybe some better options here. But I think, I feel like,
side note, on the list of most hated companies, Johnson & Johnson, like, I guess maybe this law is like, isn't Ohio State, isn't their perfect match like Blackwater? That's so great. Yes.
Because I feel like, yes, people hate Johnson and Johnson because, like, they got cancer from Johnson and Johnson,
Right.
but I don't know how many people really wake up in the morning and, like, they don't use Johnson and Johnson as a pejorative
Yep.
to reference everything wrong with, like, American, like, government. But Blackwater, like, had that position for many years.
Yeah.
Exxon certainly had it for years as well. So
they could maybe Facebook is up there with them.
Yeah, I mean, but if Facebook, I feel like is like, they're not evil enough.
Yeah.
This is an interesting thing. We need to explore this space a little bit further because I do like the idea of. I mean, honestly, it feels with this and with the lack of kind of consumer focus and quality control. It's like I feel like Boeing's going to get there at some point.
Boeing's a great.
I'm talking about for college sports as a whole. Like, there's some analogs there, but yeah, this is where we're at with the world of college sports now, where we're seriously contemplating, very poorly thought about defense contractors as jersey sponsors for major teams in the sport.
I mean, as long as the check clears, they're going to.
Right. Well, that's the thing.
I think we're going to see things on fields. We're going to see things on uniforms. So get ready for all of it.
Yeah, it's going to be a wild ride, and I'm actually very curious. Going back to what we started with and wrapping up with this, like, how much of this ends up in the video game? The video games, on the one hand, the college sports games, in particular college football, they always kind of used the commercialization as a element of realism. They'd have like the Nissan Drive, that they'd have Brad Nessler voice, or they'd have a few other things that they would sprinkle in depending on who the sponsors were at the time. So I do wonder, like, how much of this becomes part of the branding.
Well,
and
I've wondered how much, you talk about microtransactions, like there's a world where you could be like, hey man, I'm going to spend $200 on microtransactions to buy, digital NIL money for my Indiana virtual football team, but 20% of that is going to a real Indiana NIL collective. Like, there's a world where EA Sports could push this into, like, I'm going to buy NIL money that's going to then fund the school that I want to fund, both virtually and real.
I think it's, this is going to be the fascinating thing. It's like everything's on the table, and everything, the way that we think about how this stuff gets funded, if we think about it at all, and I think a lot of people have not thought about it at all, is just going to be fundamentally altered as we move forward. And why not? I mean, where else? One of the things in business and in fundraising is trying to garner donations. You want to get people into a state where they feel emotionally invested in what they're giving money to. And, that's why, to a large degree, like college athletic departments, like when you're going to renew your season tickets, well, boom, there's the donation form for additional money that you're going to give on top of this money that you're already giving. In this case, if you're sitting there for hours coaching your own team in your fake dynasty, and you're getting, you've got the fight song playing constantly, you got the colors. I mean, you could not be in an environment that is any more custom made to ask for money than you are right there. And if you can somehow fit it organically into the play, that sounds like a marketer's wet dream, and it also sounds like a horrific psychological experiment, all at the same time.
I know we're going back to the game. Like, I do wonder if the game's going to have any humor with what's going on, where, like, if you're the coach, can you come out and complain to your fan base you're not getting enough NIL dollars? And, like, are they going to have pieces where you can, like, some of the things we've talked about jokingly, like, because a lot of time, and I understand the game, it's also like the game has never allowed you, when it was there, to, break the BCS and, like, have a 12-team tournament. Like, it was always whatever the construct was.
Right.
I don't think they're going to have, like, a conference realignment generator, because they'll just want you to buy the game again next year with the updated conferences. But I wouldn't mind the game having a little bit of humor with those types of, with how crazy things are. Like, can you buy sponsorship? Like, can you bitch to your fans you're not getting NIL dollars and things like that?
Yeah, no, it's a real interesting thing, because ultimately there's a lot of what occurred before in this game was the NCAA because they were the ones controlling the license,
Right.
would not let certain things in the game. Like that 2014 NCAA 2014 game, you couldn't do a playoff
Right.
under the setup. Which was weird because there was an addition to the game. I don't know if it was 02 or 03 where you could do a playoff. Right. And then the NCAA was like, no. Well, this game is not happening because of the NCAA. Game is happening because of the conferences and because of the NIL settlement. So I do wonder if maybe some humor gets put back in. I was joking with someone online yesterday or a couple of days ago about that, where it's like, will there be an option to complain about a lack of NIL support if you're a coach? I mean, there's already, from what we saw, and this is where you need to watch the dynasty stuff, where you can like slide into a recruit's DMs, but you can also go look at a recruit's social media history and like get a sense of like what pitches that they need to have given to them based upon what they've tweeted or whatever social media they're utilizing. So maybe there will be some actual like real life funny shit that goes on with this. I think it could be pretty fascinating.
Or maybe like one of those games where like, yeah, as a coach, you have to then read the newspaper. Like, what's going on in the court hearings? Like, I'm going to read the court cases from 2020, 2028. Like, what's going on with the NCAA?
Bad. Anyway, going to be interesting. One last breaking thing. Rocco Miller, my buddy from College Hoops Bracketology, just announced this. Indiana hosting UNC Greensboro in basketball this year, which that means, as Mike Schumann from the Daily Hoosier pointed out, only 3 unknown games now for IU in this upcoming season. So if you look at the schedule as we currently think we know it,
and based on that, I mean, those 3 unknowns should probably just more likely going to be just nothing.
Well, so right now it looks like, from what we've seen in this 2024-25, I actually don't have the schedule up right now. I thought I was going to be able to pull it up, but I don't have it at this point, unfortunately. But scheduling wise, it's going to be one of those where the Atlantis tournament is almost certainly going to be kind of the only major thing that you see in the non-conference season, I think. You've got some decent teams. I mean, Sam Houston State is apparently that is a game that's going to happen. And Sam Houston State was a decent team this last year. In KenPom, they finished 142nd. Greensboro actually finished 147th. So that's another team that Mike Woodson and his staff have scheduled that is not a terrible team. They're right in the middle of the KenPom rankings. We know that Indiana is also playing Eastern Illinois, Chattanooga, and then we don't know what the bracket's going to look like for the battle for Atlantis, but we know that that's got several pretty good teams in it. Arizona, Gonzaga, Oklahoma's there, West Virginia's there, Providence, Louisville, Davidson. So yeah, some interesting stuff as far as all that's concerned.
I mean, it does. The only thing I will say is if there's no other real marquee games, it's going to put a real premium on Atlantis. And depending on how that bracket breaks, you don't want to be in a spot where if you lose your first game and then you play Davidson and then maybe you're playing, Oklahoma, or there's a path where you could go to Atlantis and because of one tough loss, come away with not a lot to show for it from a RPI or KenPom perspective, and then you're kind of fighting that battle that we were fighting all of last year, where just the non-conference is kind of haunting your entire season.
We're going to get into that as we get closer to basketball season. But yes, also big congratulations to the mayor, Adam Howard, who just got named as the Assistant Director of Recruiting and Operations for Indiana University basketball. If you're on social media at all, you probably follow Adam. If you don't, you should. Really big congratulations to him. Nice step in his career as he gets a permanent position with IU, and has been a big part, I know, of what the program's done over the last few years. So anyway, that'll wrap it up for us. I hope those of you who are listening or watching have a wonderful 4th of July, or if you've already had the 4th of July, I hope you have a great weekend, an extended one, hopefully, for everybody. Scott, any does the neighborhood shoot off its own special brand of fireworks, or like how does this? Do you get them imported directly from Macau? Like how does this operate?
Yes, directly. We have a shipment. It's funny. I'm laughing only because there is, not on our street, but there is the street behind us. They shoot off fireworks and they actually have it synced to an app where you can listen to music. And it's like, it's a guy who does pyrotechnics, and it's like, he does a 20-minute show. It's dynamite every year. It's sometimes better than the Westfield ones, though Westfield had drones last year, which was kind of cool. So we have a pretty solid fireworks show here. So actually, it's July. He always does them on July 3rd. So he does them a day early. So we are recording this on July 3rd. I'm about to go hop into my buddy's pool. We're having a pool party, and then we're going to watch the fireworks, assuming it doesn't rain.
How does Waffles handle fireworks?
So Waffles is my dog. For those who don't know, it's just, I don't bring inanimate objects to the party. Like, I have my Waffles, I have my French toast, and my French toast is scared. We're very nervous about Scott. My dog, he's okay with them, honestly. He does no barking. He's more freaked out with squirrels and noises in the backyard. Fireworks kind of almost are like beyond the level of noise. It's like if he thinks he hears a squirrel, he's going nuts. He doesn't do too well. How do your dogs do through fireworks?
Nelson, no problems. Nelson could care less, frankly, or couldn't care less. Stuart really struggles, like to the point we've had to kind of medicate him a little bit just to calm him down, which makes this is the downside to having the holiday in the middle of the week, because people started shooting the fireworks off last Thursday,
and they'll go through another
week and a half probably. Yeah, it's great time. That was not a thing when we were kids, Scott. Like people just shot the fireworks off on the 4th. And a lot of times you were doing it at home. It was great. You'd go buy the out-of-state fireworks and you'd sign the form saying, I promise I'm not shooting these off in state, which, man, you think back on that, it's like that whole facade was really stupid.
Yeah.
But
I would love to know somebody who got arrested for that. Like, that must suck. That would be a really, like, come on, man. Like, really?
Conversely, I'd love to know who actually was like, we got to take these out of state. Like, it would like drive to Illinois and shoot them there. And it's like, wow, you are not cool. You are not a person who it would be a whole lot of fun to hang out with, I'm guessing.
I'll give you a point if you want to cut this, but it's probably the same people who now go to Illinois and like, we got to smoke this here. We can't go back to Indiana.
I don't know what you're talking about, Scott. Anyway, all right. We'll wrap it up there. Thanks to all of you folks for listening, and thank you, Scott. We'll look forward to talking more IU football, IU basketball. We're going to have a fun month of July. Looking forward to the next few months here as we get ramped up for IU sports season. Thanks to Homefield Apparel, and thanks to the entire rest of the Back Home Network. For all those folks, I'm Galen Clavio. Bring back the Bison. We'll catch you on the flip side. So long, everybody.